What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video, we're going to continue our series looking at each division in the NFL in preparation for the 2024 fantasy football season. We're going to do the AFC West today. AFC West has a lot of question marks, so we're going to break it all down today. And we're going to continue our fantasy football coverage throughout the next couple weeks in preparation for draft season and then game day week 1. So if you're interested in checking that out, like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. As well as if you're interested in other stuff as well, please check out my description below. I make a wide variety of content on this channel. All right, so we'll get into it with the Denver Broncos. And for each team, we're going to do quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defensive kicker like we've done throughout the series. So, Denver. Denver is projected to be one of the poor teams in football this season. And offensively, there's not a lot of exciting options in fantasy football. So this should be pretty quick, is what I'm basically saying. Bo Nix is projected to be the starting quarterback on this team. And I think with how high Denver invested in him, I think they're going to give him that opportunity. How will he do, though? There's definitely a question mark. He's not getting drafted. Could this be the next CJ Stroud that is an undrafted fantasy football quarterback that becomes a league-winning quarterback? I am highly skeptical of that. But, you know, Sean Payton has been a successful offensive coordinator through his career, and offensive mind, so you never really know. I think that this is going to be somebody that I am keeping my eye on. In 2 QB leagues, I wouldn't have an issue having him on my bench and seeing what happens, but it's not a guy that I'm really targeting. In 1 quarterback leagues, he really should not be rostered at this time. There's just not a lot of offensive weapons on this team that I'm really that excited about that makes me feel like he's in a good position to be successful. And then you have Jared Stidham and Zach Wilson, who I really hope that neither of them are going to be taking starting snaps for his team, because then it's just basically going to tank the whole value of the rest of the football team. Running backs. And then this is another team that's got a lot of question marks. So all 4 of these guys, Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Audric Estime coming from Notre Dame. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these 4 end up becoming a starting running back for this team at some point in time. Javonte Williams has been pretty disappointing throughout his career. He showed flashes from time to time, but now they're saying that he's getting beat out by Perine, and in terms of like he's not looking as good as him in practice. It's not very encouraging. So I'm not very high on taking Javonte Williams on this team, just given the question marks with the rest of the guys here. Perine, I think Perine has interesting value, at least in the fact that he's a guy that gives you some receptions, and he's going late enough that it could be some solid value. But I mean, all 4 of these guys are just deep plays that you could take a flyer on. One of them is going to emerge, but I'm not targeting really any of these running backs in the draft at this time. Wide receivers. Courtland Sutton stands out as the number 1, and then you have a lot of question marks after that. So Sutton was actually pretty solid in fantasy football given the range that he was going in drafts. And I think that in the range that he's going this year, which is generally kind of around that like 6th to 8th round, it's not a bad flyer, because somebody is going to take up volume on this team in terms of the offense. And I think that Sutton has the best opportunity among the flex positions to stand out. So I'm not targeting him. It's not somebody that I'm zoned in on, but I wouldn't have a problem having him as a bench wide receiver who could step up and become a weekly starter. The rest of the receivers I'm not too sure about. Josh Reynolds was productive in Detroit last season, but has not been a consistently productive fantasy football player, so I'm kind of avoiding him. Marvin Mims is very much a hypothetical right now, and until he shows me that he could be consistent, I'm not really interested in drafting him either. Troy Franklin is the rookie coming in who has been, I think, has the most opportunity of this next group of Tim Patrick, Lil Jordan Humphrey. But again, a lot of this is going to be tied to Bo Nix. And I think quarterbacks that are put into this situation where they're starting early and they're don't have a lot of weapons on this team, I'm a little bit concerned how that's going to look. So I'm not very high on this offense as a whole. Tight ends, Greg Dulcich is interesting given that the fact that he was productive in his limited time. But none of these guys are worth drafting. I would just keep an eye on Dulcich and see if he does emerge once he does get healthy. Dealt with a lot of injuries last season. When he was healthy, he was actually pretty productive. Defensively, again, there's some solid players on this defense, but I'm not really interested in them. They had some very poor performances last season and turned it around. But let's see how this new team looks. See if their defense is going to be reliable or not. And then Will Lutz, not really interested in him too much as a kicker. All right, so we'll go to Kansas City. Kansas City is an interesting team to talk about because 3 Super Bowls out of the last 4 seasons, you really would want a part of this team's offense in your fantasy football, right? And the answer is actually no. There are not very many consistent players that you can rely upon on this team. They've kind of, in a way, ironically kind of turned into almost like a Patriots model in terms of how they distribute their fantasy football production. New England, for the longest time with Tom Brady and Belichick, were very much up in the air aside from Gronk. And now with this team and Travis Kelce getting older, what is their production going to look like? You saw last season there really were not very many reliable players, and you generally had very disappointing outputs from the guys on this team, aside from really Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice relative to where he was getting drafted. But a lot of these guys are just not. I really feel that the same situation we saw last year is going to still happen this year. But I am going to point out the guys that I do want to keep an eye on because I think they do have a chance to break out. Patrick Mahomes is I think people picked up on the fact that he should not be drafted in the first round, and now his ADP and sleeper is going in the 4th round. But I'm telling you, there is going to be somebody in your league that is going to take Patrick Mahomes in the first round, and it is a huge mistake. He is an excellent quarterback. He's putting himself up there to be among the greatest of all time. Probably already is top 3. But I think that there's just no reason to take him that high given how he performs in fantasy football. He's not the QB1 consistently over the past 2 seasons. Just don't cost yourself a flex by taking Patrick Mahomes in the first round. Running backs. Isaiah Pacheco is probably one of the best performers on this team that I foresee will have a good 2024 season. Very explosive, very involved at the goal line. I think that he's going to have a lot of opportunity. And I think that among the people that have a consistent role in this team, you know what his role is. You know what his involvement running the ball is going to be. I think he's got a lot of opportunity to continue and improve, and I think that this team will put him in a position to be successful, especially since they got Xavier Worthy, who I'm going to be talking about in a little bit as well. Other running backs in this team, I'm pretty sure they still have Jerick McKinnon. I don't know why they don't have him on this depth chart, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is there. Doesn't really interest me. These other guys don't really interest me unless Pacheco gets hurt. I don't think any of them are worth rostering if you have Pacheco and you're thinking about rostering their handcuff. I don't think that would be the smart way to go. Wide receivers. So wide receivers have been pretty unreliable, as I've talked about a little bit earlier for this team for a while. But one guy that I think can change that, who is going at a very reasonable round in fantasy football, around, some places are taking him in the 6th round, but he's falling all the way to the 10th in some leagues. Xavier Worthy. Coming over from Texas, this guy ran a 4.21 in the 40, which is the fastest time of all time. And you know who else is probably one of the fastest receivers of all time? Tyreek Hill. And you know what is similar? Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, the same offensive scheme. This is set up perfectly for Xavier Worthy. I would be all over trying to get this guy. Among all the receivers that I've talked about that you're getting into those mid to late rounds, Xavier Worthy is number one among those. I would be making sure that you get him on your team because Andy Reid is going to find a way to make this guy successful, and I would not be surprised if he pops off. But that being said, there are some question marks because Rashee Rice was also very productive last season, and he's heading into his second year, a little more familiar with the offense, so there's an argument to be made for him. But what is his suspension going to look like because he's not had the best of off seasons? Not going to get into the details, but we don't know what that's going to look like. So for now, I would be avoiding Rashee Rice until I know any more information about what that will look like. But if Rashee Rice is going to be available the whole season, it kind of limits Worthy's value a little bit. But I'm not really too concerned about how Worthy will perform. I think he's going to be excellent. Marquise Brown is being brought in. Again, another blazing fast receiver, but I think that he was kind of exposed last season in Arizona when he was given the opportunity to be the number one guy. I think he's just going to be one of these roulettes of receivers that Kansas City has that is not going to be reliable upon, and I would avoid him. Other guys to avoid. Well, let's start with Kadarius Toney, who is always going to be avoided by me. That guy is just such nothing personal, but you cannot rely on Kadarius Toney, and he's one of those guys that keeps getting hyped for whatever reason. It's just not going to happen. McCole Hardman, not interested in him. Justin Watson, not interested in him. How is Sky Moore still on this team? I'm not interested in him either. The only receivers I'm interested in are Rice and Worthy, and I think that Worthy I would much rather have than Rice. Travis Kelce had a pretty rough end to the season in the regular season, and then he caught fire at the Super Bowl. I really do not think that he is worth taking in the position that he's going. He's not going in the first round anymore, but still in the third round, I would rather take a chance on Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta. Somebody like that instead of Kelce, somebody that gives you a little more upside potential. So, Kelce, don't think that he's worth taking at that ADP. The defense, this is one of the excellent defenses, and I think people now know that this is a defense that you could target and probably draft early, and they will do very well. But if they fall to you in that second to last round, I would be all over taking this defense. The narrative has really switched on this team from what it was a couple years back when they had that high-flying offense when Mahomes first started in the NFL. Some people really still haven't even caught on to that. The smart fantasy players have, though, and I think that that's an important thing to point out with this team is that they're not the same as they were when this initial dynasty started back in 2018, 2019, 2020. Harrison Butker, reliable kicker, but I don't think that he's worth drafting outside of the last round. But great opportunity given the offense and the scheme that he's put into. We will go now to the Las Vegas Raiders. There's really not a lot to talk about here as well. Their quarterback is either going to be Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. Right now they have O'Connell as the starter. These guys are not people I'm looking to draft. I really don't have anything else to say there. Running backs. These are also guys I'm really not looking to draft. Zamir White, he had some opportunity last year. He's familiar with the organization. Can he actually hold up as a number one running back? I have a lot of question marks. Alexander Madison, coming over from Minnesota, underwhelming season last season. I'm not very high on him. Amir Abdullah, not very high on him. I feel that somebody is going to emerge in this backfield and be a relevant fantasy player, but I don't feel comfortable knowing who that is until you get to the preseason and to really honestly week one when you see who starts standing out. I think that this is a backfield that until I have more information on what they're going to look like when they get to actual game time, I'm going to be avoiding for the time being. Wide receivers. Devontae Adams still getting some high notoriety in that second, third round range, generally going around that 2-3 turn. I've always loved Devontae Adams throughout his career when he was with Green Bay, but I think it's just sad to me that he's kind of the way his career's kind of gone the way that he went to the Raiders, and it's just kind of I'd like to see him in a better situation. I think he's somebody that I hope could get traded to a better team. I just don't really see a path for him to be very consistent in fantasy this season. Jacoby Myers, kind of the same thing. He's shown some flashes and some talent last season and did well, but both him and Adams were very up and down given the quarterback play, and given that they haven't really upgraded the quarterback play. This is just one of those offenses, kind of like Denver, where I just see like a lot of concern with my ability to trust these receivers given the quarterback play. So I'm not really interested in the receivers on this team. I think Myers I would probably prefer, given that he's going at a lower ADP if you had to pick one of the two, but I would not really be trying to target either of them necessarily. Brock Bowers is an interesting option, though. He's coming into this team with a very successful pedigree at Georgia. I'm concerned about his quarterback play, but at the same time, I could see a path where he could be extremely successful. And he's going in the range, that late tight end range around Jake Ferguson, around Evan Ingram, stuff like that, that you really could take a big flyer with Brock Bowers, and he could, have that Sam Laporta season that's just incredible. I could definitely see that path, but I could also see a path where he is very ineffective and is droppable, a la Kyle Pitts. So there's a whole range of spectrums. So given that, and given that tight end is a very volatile position as it is, I don't feel comfortable necessarily taking that risk with him. But if you are in a situation where you missed on all your guys earlier, I think this becomes your fallback plan. And, worst comes to worst, he doesn't do well, you just cut him, you find somebody else that can and just go the streaming route. But I think there's a very viable path that he could become one of the best receiving options on this team. They're going to be very much a ball control team, play tough-nosed defense, control the pace of the game, and that doesn't really bode well for fantasy football, but it actually could put them in a position to be a successful football team. But we'll see what happens there. Defense, a very sneaky good defense given Max Crosby, in that they're going to get a lot of sacks. They're going to generate the opportunity for turnovers. So I think that you definitely could do worse. I would be interested in streaming this team throughout the season, and I think they actually, they could be a starting caliber defense. Daniel Carlson, not really interested in him. He kind of had a rough season last season. Didn't really live up to the expectations he had from the season before. Next, Los Angeles Chargers. As I said, there's a theme with this division where there's a lot of question marks, and I could kind of see a situation where all four of these teams are not great fantasy options. But it's an interesting discussion point. Los Angeles has radically changed their offensive design over the offseason. Gone is Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and now you have Justin Herbert and a lot of question marks. So because of that, Herbert is going in a range, that's very late. And in the last video I made, I talked about finding discount CJ Strouds, or a great value CJ Stroud. Justin Herbert is definitely a talented quarterback, is arguably just as talented as CJ Stroud. So, and Justin Herbert, because of the uncertainty on his team, is going very late in drafts. He's going, in some leagues I've seen, around the 10th to 12th round. And this is a guy that before that had been going consistently in the 4th to 5th round for several seasons in a row. But he's had some disappointing seasons. I don't feel that it's all his fault. And obviously last season, injury didn't help with that either. But this is a potentially great value pick. If they can put together an offensive scheme with Jim Harbaugh that just takes off, which, he's done before in his career with the 49ers. excellent value to be had for a position going that late. Very interested in Justin Herbert as a quarterback option. Running backs. So bringing over a lot of the guys from John Harbaugh's team, the Ravens, interestingly. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins. Kamani Vidal is a rookie that is interesting and could get into the mix as well. I'm kind of leaning towards not really taking these guys, but I foresee that if among the three, I would look most strongly at Gus Edwards. Very touchdown dependent, so that's concerning to me. But if you're getting him late, if he falls to you in that 9th round or later, I think that's a good flyer to take. J.K. Dobbins, I'm not really interested in him because he hasn't proven he can stay healthy. And Vidal, I think I do have some interest in him because of, the range that he's going in, because the guys ahead of him have question marks, but I'm not very excited about him necessarily either. Wide receivers. So a few holdovers, Joshua Palmer, Quentin Johnson, and then you're bringing in some new guys, DJ Chark, Ladd McConkey, who's the first-round pick from Georgia, or early second-round pick from Georgia. So what is this going to look like for this team? I think that, to me, Joshua Palmer is the one that I like the most among these four, because he's familiar with the system. He's done well in games where there've been injuries to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. He's stepped up more than Quentin Johnson has. Quentin Johnson has more potential, so you're taking a risk with him that could be high reward, but also could very well be a bust, because that's kind of how he played last season. Ladd McConkey is stepping into a situation where he could be very successful. Again, a talented receiver coming in out of Georgia. He's going to have opportunity. I just have a little concern about how he's going to fit into this team in terms of how involved they're going to have him in their offense. I kind of see this team kind of go in a similar direction where they may not necessarily have a kind of in years past, like one guy that they keep targeting. So I think Ladd McConkey, among those other receivers like Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, he's lower on my list than them, but he's definitely somebody that I think could really take off this season. And Chark you're not really getting anything great there, but you could get a pretty consistent play in very deep leagues that could be valuable time to time. Somebody will step up. There's just a lot of question marks on this team right now. So I think among the guys that you could take risk on, I think that Palmer and McConkey are Herbert, Palmer, McConkey are the guys that I'm interested in taking risk on this offense. But I'm really interested to see how things look throughout the season, because there's just so much new information on this team. These tight ends don't really stand out to me necessarily. Will Disley, Hayden Hurst, Donald Parham. That guy, always is gets the short end of the stick. They just keep bringing in tight ends to put over top of them on the depth chart, it seems. Defense. Again, I think this defense will actually be very sneaky good this season. I think Harbaugh will find a way to make them successful with just how much talent they have. I think this is one I would definitely try to target on the waiver wires or late in drafts if available. Cameron Dicker actually had a pretty good season last season, and he does have that dome effect. So of the guys that are going to be there on waivers, I think this is a solid option. Just want to make sure that the offense is going to put him in a position to be successful, to get down the field, generate field goals, which I think they will. Cameron Dicker would be a solid guy to pick up on waivers. That's all that I have for the AFC South. We will continue with this series now with the NFC, so stay tuned for more videos, and please subscribe if you're interested in more content. Have a good night. Talk to you guys next time.